Step into a world of imagination where science meets myth.
I thought I understood warfare. 15 cycles commanding reconnaissance flotillas across the Outer Reach. 4 successful campaigns against the Dreth Collective. 2 commendations for tactical excellence from the hierarchy itself. Then I met the humans. Not in some grand battlefield revelation. Not in a moment of strategic genius that rewrote doctrine. No, I met them in a supply depot on a moon nobody cared about, watching one of their soldiers jury-rig a broken atmospheric processor using wire cutters, ration packaging, and what I can only describe as weaponized stubbornness. That was my first mistake, thinking it was impressive. My second mistake was assuming it was an anomaly. They don't fight like we do. They don't think like we do. They don't break like anything in this galaxy should. And by the time I realized what that meant, it was already too late. This is the story of how the Korvath Expeditionary Fleet, 600 ships, 30,000 personnel, the pride of our warrior caste, learned that some species don't need to be the strongest, or the fastest, or the smartest. They just need to refuse to stop. What follows is my combat log, personnel notes, and personal recordings from the Terran border incident. Command classified most of it. The parts they didn't classify, they buried. I'm sharing it anyway. Because if we're going to survive what's coming, someone needs to understand what we're actually dealing with. The smell hit me first. Not the recycled air stink you get used to on long deployments. Not the tang of industrial lubricant or the faint ozone from overworked climate systems. Burned insulation, scorched metal. The particular kind of acrid wrongness that meant something critical was dying and nobody had stopped it yet. I stood in the cargo bay doorway of Outpost Tertius 9, watching my operational timeline dissolve. Officer Corrin. My aide, Thesic, held a datapad like it might explode. The primary atmospheric processor is non-functional. I can smell it. Yes. The technicians estimate 40 hours minimum for replacement parts to arrive from... We have 6 hours before the Hierarch's inspection convoy arrives. Thesic's mandibles clicked nervously. A tell. He knew what this meant. 6 hours. No breathable air. A failed supply depot that I was responsible for auditing. My name on the efficiency report. My career turning into a cautionary example they'd use in officer training. I pressed my primary hands together. Breathed. But focused on not snapping Thesic's datapad in half. Show me the damage. The processor room was a monument to mechanical failure. Coolant pooled on the deck plating. Exposed conduits sparked intermittently. The main compression unit, which should have been humming at a steady 60-cycle rhythm, sat silent and dead, its casing peeled open like something had tried to gut it. 3 Korvath technicians stood around it, not working, just standing there with the blank expression of people whose training had encountered a problem their manual didn't cover. Replacement core is shattered, the lead tech said. Her name was Velis. Competent normally. Right now she looked like she wanted to file a transfer request. Microfracture cascade, the whole unit's compromised. Cause? Unknown. Could be a manufacturing defect. It could be, I don't need theories, I need solutions. She gestured helplessly at the ruined machine. There are no solutions. Not in 6 hours. Not without parts we don't have. I felt my secondary arms twitch. Old stress reflex. Velis noticed. Took a step back. Officer Corrin. Thesic again, voice carefully neutral. There's a human on station. I turned. What? Terran Alliance liaison. Assigned here for supply chain coordination. He's been working in the secondary depot for the last 3 cycles. Humans. I'd read the briefings. New species. Technologically primitive by hierarchy standards. Useful for manual labor and resource extraction. Strange biology. Carbon-based, oxygen breathers. Absurdly short lifespans. They'd signed a trade agreement with the outer systems a year ago. Mostly they stayed out of the way. Why? I said slowly. Would a human be relevant to atmospheric processor repair? Thesic's mandibles twitched again. He asked about the smell. The human was shorter than I expected. Not that I had clear expectations. The visual references in the briefing files were grainy, inconsistent. Terrans apparently came in a bewildering variety of sizes and colorations, which struck me as evolutionarily inefficient. This one was male, according to his station profile. Designation: Corporal Rayner Hayes, Terran Logistics Corps. Pale skin, dark hair cropped close to the skull, wearing a jumpsuit that looked like it had survived several industrial accidents. He stood in front of the dead processor with his hands on his hips, head tilted slightly to one side. Then he laughed. Not a polite acknowledgement. A genuine, a full-body laugh that echoed off the metal walls. Velis stiffened. Thesic made a small, confused noise. I just stared. "Sorry," Hayes said, still grinning. He had an accent I couldn't quite place, clipped consonants, lazy vowels. "Sorry, it's just... Wow, you guys really did a number on this thing." "This unit," I said carefully, "failed due to structural compromise. We are working to..." "Yeah, no, I get it." He waved a hand vaguely. "But you're not going to fix it. Not with replacement parts. Not in 6 hours." Silence. "Are you," I asked, "offering a professional assessment?" "I'm saying I can rig something." Velis made a derisive sound. "Rig something. This is a Corvath industrial processor. Class 7 compression system. It requires precision components manufactured to exacting..." Hayes was already moving. He crouched next to the exposed core housing, running his fingers along the damaged plating. Not scanning it, not analyzing with instruments, just touching it, like he was trying to learn its shape through contact alone. "You've got a secondary coolant loop here." He tapped a conduit. "This feeds back into the primary system, right?" Velis hesitated. "Yes, but that line is compromised." "Yeah, I can see that." He stood, brushed his hands on his jumpsuit. "You've got a fabrication shop on this station?" "We have a light manufacturing facility for basic..." "Great. I need wire mesh, thermal adhesive, and about 2 meters of flex tubing. Also a welding rig. And coffee if you've got it, but I'm guessing you don't." He said it like he was ordering spare parts from a quartermaster. Casual, confident. I felt something shift in my chest. Not quite irritation. Not quite curiosity. "You believe," I said, "that you can repair a Corvath Class 7 atmospheric processor using wire mesh and adhesive?" Hayes looked at me. Really looked, for the first time since I'd entered the room. His eyes were forward-facing, binocular vision. Predator trait, the briefing had noted. Evolutionary holdover from some violent ancestral past. Right now, those eyes were amused. "Repair? No, but I can keep it running long enough for your inspection." Probably. "Yeah, probably. You want a guarantee? Call someone with a warranty. You want this thing breathing air in 6 hours? Let me work." I should have said no. Should have filed the incident, documented the failure, accepted the inevitable career damage, and moved on with some shred of procedural dignity intact. Instead, I said, "Thesic, get him whatever he needs." Hayes worked like someone who'd learned engineering from breaking things. He didn't consult technical diagrams, didn't pull up system specifications. He just moved through the processor's guts with a kind of chaotic confidence, pulling components, testing connections, muttering a constant stream of commentary that ranged from technical observation to creative profanity. Okay, this is dumb, but it might work. He'd ripped out half the secondary coolant system and rebuilt it using flex tubing and what appeared to be actual ration packaging. Velis watched with an expression caught between horror and fascination. "That cannot possibly maintain pressure integrity," she said. "Doesn't have to." Hayes didn't look up. He was wrapping thermal adhesive around a jury-rigged connection point, so his hands moving with precise, practiced efficiency. "Just has to hold for 8 hours, maybe 10 if we're lucky. And if it fails? Then your boss gets to explain to the hierarch why the depot smells like an electrical fire." He grinned when he said it. I found myself pacing. Old habit. Helped me think. "Why?" I asked. Hayes glanced over his shoulder. Why what? Why are you doing this? This isn't your responsibility. Your assignment here is supply chain coordination, not emergency repair. He shrugged. Smelled bad. Figured I'd check it out. That's not an answer. Sure it is. He returned his attention to the processor. Look, officer, Corin, right? Back home. If something's broken and you can fix it, you fix it. Doesn't matter whose job it is. Doesn't matter if it's in the manual. Yeah, you just fix it and move on. That's not how systems work. Yeah, well, he twisted a valve assembly into place, testing the seal. Maybe your systems are different. I watched him work in silence. The thing was, he wasn't good at this. Not in the technical sense. His methods were crude. His solutions were inelegant. A proper Corvath engineer would have documented 17 procedural violations in the first 10 minutes alone. But the processor was coming together. Slowly, inefficiently, but together. 4 hours later, the atmospheric processor hummed, not smoothly, not quietly. It made a concerning rattling noise every third compression cycle, and the coolant flow indicator kept flickering amber. But it was running. Hayes stood back, wiping his hands on a rag that was somehow dirtier than his hands. He looked exhausted. His jumpsuit was stained with coolant and adhesive. There was a scorch mark on his left sleeve. He was still grinning. There you go. Probably won't explode. Velis ran a diagnostic scan, stared at the results, ran it again. It's functioning, she said slowly. Not optimally, but within acceptable parameters. Told you. I stepped forward. The processor's hum vibrated through the deck plating. The air tasted clean, recycled, but breathable. This shouldn't work, I said. Hayes laughed. Yeah, I get that a lot. The inspection went smoothly. Hierarch's convoy arrived on schedule, reviewed the depot systems, found everything in working order. My efficiency report remained intact. Nobody mentioned the atmospheric processor's creative internal architecture. I stood in the observation deck afterward. I'm watching the convoy ships detach and burn toward the next checkpoint. Thesic beside me, datapad in hand, already compiling the post-inspection summary. The human is requesting reassignment, he said. Back to primary logistics hub. Denied. Thesic's mandibles clicked. Officer, I want him here. Assign him to maintenance coordination, temporary posting. May I ask why? I thought about Hayes, crouched in the guts of that processor, rebuilding broken systems with wire and spite and terrible improvisation. Call it professional curiosity. Over the next 8 cycles, I learned 3 things about humans. First, they broke rules the way some species breathed. Not maliciously, not even consciously. They just saw a procedure and immediately started calculating whether it was necessary or just convenient. And Hayes repaired 4 more critical systems during his temporary posting. None of his solutions appeared in any manual. 2 of them violated basic engineering principles. All of them worked. Second, they didn't work alone well. Hayes was tolerable when focused on a problem. Give him a broken machine and he'd attack it with focused intensity, muttering and improvising until it functioned. But put him in a room with other humans? Chaos. We'd brought in 3 more Terran liaisons for expanded supply operations. Within 2 cycles, they'd reorganized our entire cargo management system, implemented something they called cross-training protocols, and started what they referred to as efficiency competitions, that mostly seemed to involve seeing who could move the most crates in the shortest time while making jokes I didn't understand. Where productivity increased 17%. Morale among Corvath personnel dropped noticeably. Nobody liked being shown up by species who shouldn't even theoretically understand our systems. Third, they didn't quit. This was the part that unsettled me. I watched Hayes work a 30-hour shift repairing a malfunctioning gravity plate system. No breaks, no sleep. Just constant motion and problem solving and that endless stream of muttered commentary. When Velis finally ordered him to stop before he collapsed, he looked genuinely confused. I'm almost done. You've been working for 30 hours. Yeah, so? That's biologically inadvisable. He laughed. I've worked longer. And he said it like it was normal. The message from Fleet Command arrived on Cycle 47. Priority encrypted. Command level authorization. I read it twice. Then a third time, hoping the words would somehow rearrange themselves into something that made sense. Korvath Expeditionary Fleet to deploy to Terran border region. Strategic assessment mission. Evaluate alliance defensive capabilities. Potential enforcement action pending review. Enforcement action. That was the polite term for what we all knew it meant. The hierarchy had decided humans were expanding too quickly, taking too much territory, making too many independent decisions that complicated resource allocation models. So they were sending a fleet to remind Earth what power looked like. 600 ships, 30,000 personnel, and me, Reconnaissance Command, expected to provide tactical assessment and operational support. I sat in my office, staring at that message, feeling something cold settle in my chest. I thought about Hayes, about his jury-rigged processes and his 30-hour repair marathons, and his absolute conviction that broken things just needed someone stubborn enough to fix them. I thought about 4 humans reorganizing our cargo systems in 2 cycles. I thought about a species that looked at procedural limits as suggestions. My secondary arms twitched. Thesic. My aide appeared in the doorway. Officer, pull all available intelligence on Terran military capabilities. Everything. Deployments, ship classifications, tactical doctrine, engagement history. I want it compiled and cross-referenced by morning. Is there something specific you're looking for? I stared at the message, at those 2 words. Enforcement action. I'm looking for whatever I'm missing. The files were worse than I expected. No, not because they showed weakness, because they showed almost nothing at all. Terran Alliance military data was sparse, contradictory, and frustratingly incomplete. Ship counts varied between reports. Tactical doctrine was classified or simply unavailable. Engagement history consisted of minor border skirmishes with non-aligned raiders, nothing suggesting organized military capacity. On paper, they looked barely functional. One detail stood out. A footnote in a cultural analysis report buried under sections about human social structure and trade negotiations. Terran military forces exhibit disproportionate operational persistence in adverse conditions. Recommend further study of cultural factors influencing combat resilience. Operational persistence. I thought about Hayes. They're working 30 hours straight because he wasn't done yet. My mandibles clicked softly. I found Hayes in the secondary depot, teaching 2 Korvath junior technicians how to bypass a damaged power relay using what appeared to be scavenged control chips and sheer willpower. Officer Corrin. He straightened, wiping his hands, still grinning, always grinning. What can I do for you? I need to ask you something, professionally. Sure. If your people were threatened by a larger military force, significantly larger, with superior technology and resources, how would you respond? His grin faded slightly. Not disappearing, just changing. Something sharper underneath. That a hypothetical question? Yes. Uh-huh. He crossed his arms. Well, hypothetically, we'd probably try diplomacy first. See if we could talk it out. And if diplomacy failed, then we'd fight. You'd lose. Probably. He said it easily, like he was discussing cargo schedules. But we'd make it expensive. Expensive? Yeah. See, thing about humans, we're not the strongest, not the fastest, not the smartest probably, though don't tell the guys back home I said that. He smiled, but his eyes stayed sharp. But we're stubborn, and we remember. Remember what? Everything. Every fight we've ever lost. Every mistake that got someone killed. Every time someone told us we couldn't do something, he stepped closer. Not threatening, but deliberate. You want to know what humans do when something bigger and meaner decides to push us around? We learn. We adapt. We find the weak points. And we don't stop. Ever. Even when it's stupid. especially when it's stupid. The silence stretched. That's not a strategy, I said finally. That's suicide. Hayes shrugged. Hasn't killed us yet. 3 cycles later, I received my deployment orders. Fleet was mobilizing. Reconnaissance units to depart ahead of the main force. Establish surveillance positions along the Terran border. Assess defensive installations. Identify strategic targets. I stood on the observation deck, watching Hayes work in the depot below. He was teaching another group of technicians something, gesturing animatedly, probably violating 6 safety protocols while making everyone around him more effective despite themselves. Thesic appeared at my side. The transport leaves in 2 hours. I know. Are you concerned about the deployment? I thought about that question. About 600 ships heading toward a species that fixed broken things with wire and stubbornness. About humans who worked 30-hour shifts because they weren't done yet. About operational persistence and expensive fights, and a species that remembered everything. Ask me again, I said, in 30 cycles. Space looks different when you're about to start a war. Same stars, same void, same mathematical certainty of orbital mechanics and nav calculations. But different. I stood on the bridge of the distant Thunder, watching 600 Korvath warships hold formation against the black, and all I could think about was Hayes laughing at a broken atmospheric processor. Officer Corrin. Commander Dravak's voice cut through my thoughts. Dravak commanded the reconnaissance battle group, 8 ships, including mine, tasked with advanced scouting, excellent service record, 20 cycles of combat experience, currently projecting an air of absolute confidence that I was pretty sure neither of us felt. Commander, initial scans of the border installations are complete. The humans have 47 defensive platforms distributed across this sector, mix of weapon emplacements and sensor arrays. And their fleet? Minimal presence. Perhaps 30 vessels total. Most appear to be converted cargo haulers with weapons grafted on. Nothing that should pose a significant threat to our forces. I studied the tactical display. The Terran defensive positions looked almost quaint. Small stations, scattered patrol routes, nothing resembling a coherent defensive strategy. On paper, this would be over in days. Commander, I said carefully, have you reviewed the cultural assessments on human combat behavior? Dravak's mandibles twitched. Annoyance. I've reviewed the tactical assessments. That's what matters. The cultural reports suggest... Officer Corrin. He turned to face me fully. I understand you've had contact with Terran personnel. Perhaps that's colored your perspective. But cultural quirks don't change battlefield mathematics. We have superior numbers, superior technology, superior training. Yes, Commander. Your reconnaissance group will advance to grid position Delta 7. Establish surveillance of the nearest Terran installation. Standard protocols. Report anything anomalous. I saluted, returned to my command station. Thesic appeared beside me, datapad ready. The crew is concerned, he said quietly. About what? About fighting humans? As the stories have been circulating. About their persistence. I thought about that word. Persistence. Such a clinical term for what I'd watched Hayes do. For working 30 hours because stopping didn't occur to him. For rebuilding broken systems with materials that shouldn't work and determination that shouldn't exist. Tell the crew, I said, to follow procedures and stay alert. That's all we can do. The Terran installation designated Target Delta. 7 looked like someone had built a military outpost using spare parts and optimism. Mismatched hull plating, asymmetric weapon mounts, sensor arrays that appeared to be at least 3 different models jury-rigged together. The whole structure had a cobbled-together quality that would have embarrassed any proper Korvath engineer. It was also broadcasting civilian traffic control signals. They're not even pretending to be military, my sensor officer said. Those are standard commercial IFF codes. Life signs? Approximately 300 personnel, mix of military and civilian signatures. I studied the readouts. 300 people, minimal defensive armament. 1 small patrol ship docked at the outer ring. Easy target, too easy. Maintain surveillance position. Passive sensors only. I want to know everything about how that station operates before we do anything else. Officer, our orders are... I know what our orders are. I kept my voice level. And I'm following them. We're gathering intelligence. That's what reconnaissance does. We watched the station for 6 hours. And slowly, I started seeing patterns. The patrol ship launched every 90 minutes. Not regular enough to be automated. Too regular to be random. It would sweep a specific search pattern, then return to dock. Personnel rotations happened in overlapping shifts. Never a moment when fewer than 70% of the crew was active. Supply shuttles arrived at irregular intervals, but always with escorts. Small cargo haulers accompanied by those converted warships Dravac had dismissed. The station didn't operate like a military installation. It operated like a hive. Officer, my communications specialist looked up from her console. I'm picking up something strange. Define strange. Encrypted transmissions. Not military-grade encryption. We've already broken that. But there's a secondary layer underneath. Personal communications between station personnel. They're talking about us. Let me hear it. She routed the audio feed. 2 human voices, male and female. They're speaking in that clipped English dialect that always sounded vaguely rushed. 3 ships holding position at long range. Corvath design, reconnaissance class. How long they been there? 6 hours now, just watching. Weird. You'd think if they were going to hit us, they'd hit us. Maybe they're waiting for something. Or maybe they're trying to figure out if we're worth the ammunition. Laughter. Actual laughter. They knew we were here. They'd known for 6 hours. And instead of panic or defensive scrambling, they were joking about it. Officer Corrin, Thesic said quietly. That seems inadvisable from a defensive standpoint. Yes, I said. It does. The attack came on hour 9 of our surveillance. Not from the station. From behind us. Missile lock. My sensor officer's voice jumped an octave. 3 inbound. An origin point. She stopped. Recalculated. Origin point is asteroid cluster 734. How did they... Evasive maneuvers. Point defense active. The distant thunder rolled hard to starboard. Our automated defense grid lit up, tracking the incoming missiles with precision that should have been more than adequate. 2 missiles detonated early. Point defense doing its job. The third one hit us amidships, not with explosive force. With some kind of adhesive compound that spread across our hull plating like metallic webbing, instantly hardening and interfering with our maneuvering thrusters. What the... It's not a weapon, my engineering officer said, pulling up damage analysis. It's industrial construction foam. They weaponized construction foam. Can we remove it? Not quickly. It's bonded to the hull, where we'd need to either burn it off or cut it away manually. I stared at the tactical display. The attack hadn't damaged us, hadn't even really threatened us. It had just made us slower. Officer, my communications specialist again. Receiving transmission from the asteroid cluster. It's the Terrans. On screen. The human face that appeared was female, dark-skinned, with hair pulled back in a tight bun. Military uniform, captain's insignia. She looked tired and amused in equal measure. Corvath reconnaissance vessel, she said. This is Captain Okafor, Terran Defense Force. You've been sitting in our space for 9 hours. Either state your intentions or leave. I felt my secondary arms clench. This is Officer Vaith Corrin, Corvath Expeditionary Fleet. We are conducting legitimate surveillance operations in disputed... Nothing's disputed. You're in Terran Alliance territory. You know it. I know it. And that fleet of yours sitting at the border knows it. Captain, I must protest. Protest noted. Here's the thing, Officer Corrin. She leaned forward slightly. We've been watching your fleet assemble for 3 weeks. We know why you're here. We know what you're planning. So I'm going to save us both some time. She smiled. It wasn't friendly. You can try to enforce whatever the hierarchy thinks needs enforcing. You can bring all 600 ships across our border and see what happens. But I promise you, by the time it's over, you're going to wish you'd just sent a strongly worded letter instead. Silence on my bridge. Captain, I said slowly. You have 47 defensive platforms and maybe 50 combat-capable ships. We have 600 warships and full fleet support. The mathematics are not in your favor. Yeah, she nodded. Probably not. But here's the thing about humans, officer. We don't fight wars to win. We fight wars to make you regret starting them. The transmission cut. I sat there, staring at the blank screen, feeling something cold work its way up my spine. We burned off the construction foam after 4 hours of work. In that time, 3 more Terran patrol vessels had appeared at random points around our surveillance position. None of them attacked, they just watched us, mirroring what we'd been doing to them. Psychological warfare. Crude, but effective. When we finally rejoined the main reconnaissance group, Commander Drevak was waiting with questions. You were delayed. Yes, Commander. The Terrans deployed improvised weapons. Construction materials converted to offensive capability. Casualties? None. But the attack demonstrated concerning tactical awareness. Drevak's mandibles clicked dismissively. One lucky ambush doesn't change the strategic picture. The hierarch has authorized first contact protocols. We'll be transmitting formal terms within the cycle. Terms? Territorial concessions, technology transfers, revised trade agreements, standard enforcement language. He waved a secondary hand. They'll refuse initially, then we demonstrate force, then they'll negotiate. I thought about Captain Okafor's smile. We don't fight wars to win. We fight wars to make you regret starting them. Commander, I recommend we proceed with caution. The Terrans have shown... I know what they've shown. Improvisation, unorthodox tactics. It's all in your report. Drevak turned to face the tactical display, where the fleet hung in perfect formation. But tactics don't overcome numbers. They can harry us, annoy us, maybe even damage a few ships. But they cannot win. The mathematics don't allow it. With respect, Commander, humans don't seem overly concerned with mathematics. For the first time, Drevak looked genuinely uncertain. Then what are they concerned with? I thought about Hayes. About 30-hour repair marathons. About fixing broken things because stopping didn't occur to him. Persistence, I said quietly. The hierarch's terms were transmitted at 0800 standard. 16 pages of legal language that boiled down to surrender territory, surrender autonomy, or be forced to surrender both. The human response came back in under an hour. One word. No. And the first engagement happened 3 cycles later. Not at the border. Deeper into Terran space, where a Korvath cruiser had been conducting what Command called aggressive reconnaissance, and what anyone with tactical sense would call deliberate provocation. The cruiser disappeared mid-transmission. No distress signal, no debris field. Just there one moment, gone the next. Fleet Command assumed technical failure. Sent a recovery group. The recovery group found the cruiser. It was intact, powered down, drifting on minimal life support. Every single computer system had been wiped. Not damaged, not hacked, completely erased. Navigation, weapons control, environmental systems, all reduced to blank memory cores. The crew was alive, scared, but alive. And every wall of every corridor had the same message painted in luminous orange paint. Turn around. I read the recovery report 3 times. They didn't destroy it, Thesik said quietly. He'd been reading over my shoulder. They could have, but they didn't. No, they sent a message instead. What kind of species disables a warship just to write on it? I thought about that question. About a species that fixed broken things with wire and stubbornness. That worked 30-hour shifts because stopping didn't occur to them. That looked at a superior military force and promised to make them regret the fight rather than trying to avoid it. The kind, I said, that wants you to know they could have killed you, but chose not to. Yet. Thesik's mandibles trembled. That's psychological warfare. Yes. That's terrifying. Yes. What do we do? I stared at the report, at those two words painted across a disabled warship. Turn around. We follow orders, I said, and hope someone smarter than us figures out how to stop this before it gets worse. It got worse. Over the next 15 cycles, the Korvath Expeditionary Fleet lost 12 ships. Not destroyed. Lost. They disappeared during patrols, reconnaissance missions, routine supply runs. Some were found later. Disabled, crew alive, systems wiped, messages painted in that same luminous orange. Turn around last warning. Go home. Some were never found at all. Fleet Command responded with escalation. Larger patrol groups, heavier escorts, aggressive sensor sweeps. The humans responded with patience. They didn't attack the main fleet. Didn't engage in open battle. They just kept picking off isolated ships, kept disrupting our formations, kept making us paranoid about every shadow on the sensors, and they kept painting messages. It's asymmetric warfare, Commander Drevak said during a strategy briefing. He looked older than he had 3 weeks ago. We all did. They can't face us in direct confrontation, so they're trying to exhaust us, make us waste resources chasing ghosts. It's working, someone muttered. Drevak slammed a primary hand on the table. It's working because we're allowing it to work. The solution is simple. We stop spreading our forces. We mass our strength and strike directly at their core installations. Force them into the open battle they're avoiding. Commander, I said carefully, every tactical assessment suggests that's exactly what they want us to do. Then we do it anyway, because the alternative is sitting here while they pick us apart one ship at a time. Silence around the table. Officer Corrin. Drevak focused on me. Your reconnaissance group will spearhead the assault. Target the installation you've been monitoring, Delta 7. We'll demonstrate what happens when you mock the hierarchy's patience. I felt my mandibles lock. That station. 300 people. Mismatched hull plating. Jury-rigged weapon systems. Captain Okafor's smile. We fight wars to make you regret starting them. Understood, Commander. We approached target Delta 7 with 8 warships in tight formation. Every sensor active. Every weapon system primed. Every crew member at combat stations. The station waited. It had doubled its complement since I'd last surveilled it. 600 personnel now. The patrol ship had been joined by 4 converted cargo haulers, those ramshackle warships with weapons grafted onto civilian frames. Outgunned. Outmatched. Mathematically doomed. They opened communications before we were even in effective weapons range. Captain Okafor's face appeared on the screen. She looked exactly as tired and exactly as amused as before. Officer Corrin, back so soon? Captain, I'm authorized to offer you one final opportunity to stand down. Evacuate your station. Surrender your defensive position. This doesn't have to end in bloodshed. No, she agreed. It doesn't. You could also just leave. We both know that's not going to happen. Yeah, she sighed. I figured. Okay. Before this starts, I want you to know something. What? This isn't personal. You seem reasonable for someone about to make a terrible mistake. I felt my secondary arms twitch. Captain? See you on the other side, officer. The transmission cut. All ships, I said, voice steady despite the cold working through my chest. Weapons free. Target the station's power grid. Disable, don't destroy. We want... The asteroid belt behind us exploded. Not literally exploded, but 24 small vessels emerged from the rocks where they'd been hiding, completely undetected by our sensors, and opened fire with weapons that shouldn't have been able to penetrate our shields, but somehow did anyway. Evasive action! The distant thunder rolled hard. One of our escort vessels wasn't fast enough, so something punched through its port shields and detonated inside the engineering section. Not catastrophically, not destructively. The ship just went dark. What hit us? I shouted, analyzing. My sensor officer stopped, stared at her readouts. It's a modified mining charge. They're using industrial mining equipment as weapons. Another ship went dark, then another. The Terran vessels moved like insects. Fast, erratic, impossible to track. They'd fire one salvo, break off, disappear into the asteroid field before we could target them effectively. Focus fire on the station. Dravak's voice came through the command channel. Destroy their central position and they'll... The station opened fire. And I finally understood what Hayes had meant about making things expensive. Those jury-rigged weapon systems weren't standard military armament, but they were mining lasers, construction cutters, industrial equipment repurposed with ruthless efficiency, and they hit like the fist of an angry god. One beam caught the Resolute Dawn across its bow. The ship's forward shields collapsed. Hull plating began to vaporize. All ships, withdraw! Withdraw to... Something hit us. The distant thunder shuddered. Lights flickered. My engineering officer was shouting damage reports that I couldn't quite process through the sudden ringing in my ears. We'd been disabled. Not destroyed. Disabled. Life support operational. Crew alive. Ship drifting. Just like that cruiser 15 cycles ago. I watched through the view screen as the Terran vessels regrouped. Watched our fleet scatter. Watched the station hold position, its mismatched weapon systems still glowing hot. Officer Corrin? My communications specialist's voice was very small. Incoming message from the Terrans. On screen. Captain Okafor appeared. She didn't look amused anymore. She looked sad. I told you, she said quietly. I told you we don't fight wars to win. We fight wars to make you regret starting them. Behind her, through the window of her command center, I could see her crew moving with practiced efficiency. Damage control teams, weapon technicians, medical personnel. They'd known we were coming. They'd prepared. They'd won. Not by destroying us, by making us understand what fighting them would actually cost. Your ship will be released when our engineers repair your systems, Okafor said. We'll tow you back to your fleet's position. And then, Officer Corrin, you're going to deliver a message to whoever's giving the orders. What message? Turn around. The transmission ended. I sat in my command chair, surrounded by my disabled ship, my scattered fleet, my broken assumptions about how warfare worked. And I started laughing. Not amusement, not relief. The laughter of someone who'd finally understood what they were actually dealing with. Thesic stared at me. Officer? They're not going to stop, I said. Are they? Sir? The humans. They're not going to stop. We can bring more ships, better weapons, perfect tactics, and they're just going to keep jury-rigging solutions and working 30-hour shifts and turning industrial equipment into weapons until we give up or run out of ships. I thought about Hayes, about operational persistence, about a species that remembered everything and never, ever quit. Sir, Thesic said carefully, what do we do? I looked at the station, at those mismatched hull plates and jury-rigged systems, and 600 people who'd just defeated 8 warships using mining equipment and construction foam. We deliver the message, I said. And then I thought about that question, about the hierarch's terms, about enforcement actions, about the mathematics of warfare that didn't account for species that refused to acknowledge mathematical limitations. And then, I said quietly, we hope someone listens. The hierarch looked like someone had carved anger into physical form and given it mandibles. I stood at attention in the command chamber of the flagship Absolute Authority, surrounded by senior officers who'd spent the last 40 cycles watching their perfect enforcement action dissolve into a humiliating war of attrition. The tactical display on the wall told the story in cold numbers. 18 ships disabled, 7 missing, presumed captured. 0 confirmed enemy vessels destroyed. Fleet morale at 32% and dropping. Supply lines disrupted. Communications compromised. And in the center of the display, that little Terran station, Target Delta 7, still broadcasting civilian traffic control signals like nothing had happened. Explain, the hierarch said, how a species with 47 defensive platforms and converted cargo haulers has reduced the pride of the Korvath military to this. Commander Dravak stepped forward. Hierarch, We've been conducting operations against an enemy that refuses to engage according to established warfare conventions. They employ improvised weapons, guerrilla tactics, and they paint graffiti on our warships. Silence. The Hierarch's secondary arms flexed. Do you know what the Hierarchy Council said when I presented them with that detail? They laughed. 7 species representatives laughed at the Korvath Expeditionary Fleet being mocked by primitives with spray paint. With respect, Hierarch, I heard myself saying. They're not primitives. Every head turned toward me. Officer Corrin. The Hierarch's voice could have frozen atmosphere. Elaborate. I stepped forward, felt my secondary arms trembling, forced them still. The Terrans aren't primitive, they're adaptive. Everything they've done, every attack, every tactic, every improvised weapon, it's not random chaos, it's methodical problem-solving under resource constraints. They use industrial equipment as weapons. Yes, because it's effective, because they don't care if it's elegant or proper or follows established military doctrine. They care if it works. That's not. They've studied us, Hierarch, for cycles. While we were analysing their defensive positions and calculating force ratios, they were learning how our ships function, how our shields operate, where our tactical assumptions create vulnerabilities. I pulled up a data file. The battle analysis from Delta 7. They didn't just disable our ships, they disabled them with minimal force. Precision strikes against specific systems, not random, not wasteful. Surgical. Commander Dravak's mandibles clicked. Officer Corrin is correct. But that only emphasizes the threat they represent, which is why we should escalate our response. Deploy heavy cruisers. Eliminate their industrial capacity. And then what? I asked. They improvise with something else. They've already shown they can weaponize mining equipment, construction materials, cargo containers. Do you think destroying their factories will stop them? Or will they just start building weapons in caves with scraps? The Hierarch stared at me. What are you suggesting? I took a breath. This was the moment. The thing I'd been thinking about for 15 cycles. Since watching Captain Okafor's sad smile. Since understanding what Hayes had really meant about persistence. I'm suggesting we stop. The silence in the chamber could have crushed atmosphere. Stop? The Hierarch's voice was dangerously quiet. Yes. And stop the enforcement action. Withdraw the fleet before this becomes something we genuinely cannot control. Unacceptable. The Hierarchy authorized enforcement against a species we thought we understood. But we don't. We fundamentally don't understand what humans are capable of. I pulled up another file. Personnel records from Outpost Tertius 9. Hayes's face appeared on the display. This is Corporal Rayner Hayes, Terran Logistics Corps. I worked with him for 47 cycles. Watched him repair systems that should have been impossible to fix. Watched him work 30-hour shifts because stopping didn't occur to him. Watched him reorganize our entire supply chain in 2 cycles because he thought it could be more efficient. I looked at the Hierarch. He's not exceptional. He's standard. That's what their species is. They're all like that. Every one of them. And we just tried to conquer them with 600 ships and conventional tactics. They have fewer than 50 combat vessels. Today. What about tomorrow? Next cycle? They're not going to surrender. They're not going to negotiate. They're going to improvise and adapt and keep fighting until either we leave or one of us is extinct. And Hierarch, I felt my voice crack slightly. I don't think we can win a war of extinction against a species that refuses to quit. The Hierarch sat back, mandibles working silently. You're recommending we retreat, withdraw from Terran space entirely, allow them to claim victory. I'm recommending we stop before they force us to retreat, because that's what will happen. Eventually, they'll just outlast us. One species cannot outlast a fleet. These can. The Hierarch didn't order withdrawal. Instead, he ordered escalation. 3 additional battle groups. Heavy cruisers with siege-class weapons. Orders to destroy Terran military infrastructure and force immediate surrender. I listened to those orders being transmitted and felt something cold and final settle in my chest. We were going to lose. Not today. Maybe not even this cycle. But eventually, because the hierarch was doing exactly what the humans wanted. Committing more resources, increasing investment, making the war more expensive, and humans specialized in expensive wars. The new battle groups arrived 12 cycles later. Commander Velith led the force. Old military family. Perfect service record. In absolutely convinced that superior firepower solved all tactical problems. I watched from the distant thunder as his fleet formed up. 97 warships. The largest concentrated force the Korvath had deployed in a generation. Impressive, Thesic said quietly. Terrifying, I corrected. Sir, because the humans are going to find a way to counter it. And when they do, we'll escalate again. And they'll counter that. And we'll keep escalating until we're committing our entire fleet to suppress one border region. You think they can defeat this force? I thought about Captain Okafor's smile. About Hayes working 30 hours because he wasn't done yet. About a species that turned construction foam into weapons and painted messages on disabled warships. I think they don't need to defeat it. They just need to make it too expensive to maintain. The assault on Terran space began at 0600 standard. 97 ships crossed the border in perfect formation, targeting 7 key installations simultaneously. Maximum force, minimum time, overwhelming firepower. The Terrans had 6 days to prepare. It wasn't enough. For us, the first wave hit the outer defensive platforms as expected. Precision strikes, overwhelming power. The platforms exploded, and then kept fighting. Impossible! Commander Velith's voice crackled across the command channel. Those installations are destroyed. How are they still? Automated systems, my sensor officer said, pulling up analysis. They're operating on independent power cores. No central control. Each platform is fighting autonomously. Then destroy the power cores. We are. But the Terrans distributed them throughout the structure. We'd have to reduce each platform to debris. Which we did. It took 40 minutes per platform. 40 minutes of sustained fire, ammunition expenditure, power drain. While somewhere in the black, human vessels watched and learned and calculated exactly how much resources we were burning to kill already doomed installations. This is inefficient, I muttered. Thesic glanced at me. Sir, this is what they want. Make us waste ammunition on empty platforms, drain our power reserves, position us for... The asteroid belt came alive. Again. 20 vessels, 50, 100. Hiding in the rocks, powered down, waiting. Not attacking the main fleet, attacking the supply ships. Protect the supply convoy. Velith's voice jumped an octave. All escort vessels fall back to... Too late. The humans didn't engage the escorts. They just deployed some kind of electromagnetic pulse that shut down every automated cargo system simultaneously. The supply ships went dark, not destroyed, not captured, just disabled, drifting, supplies intact but inaccessible. Damn them, Velith snarled. Damn them. They're not even fighting. They're just... Making it expensive, I finished quietly. The battle lasted 8 hours. We destroyed 41 Terran defensive positions. We lost 3 escort vessels to improvised weapons. We expended 70% of our ammunition reserves on automated platforms. We disabled 0 human combat ships. They melted into the asteroid belts, disappeared into nebula clouds, scattered like insects and regrouped at unpredictable intervals. And somewhere in the chaos, someone hacked our communications network and broadcast the same message across every channel. Turn around painted in luminous orange text across every display screen in the fleet. I stared at those words on my command console and started laughing again. That awful broken laughter that came from understanding you were part of a historical mistake that would be studied for generations. Officer Corrin. Thesic's voice was very careful. Are you well? They hacked our communications to paint graffiti. While we were fighting. They took the time to paint graffiti. Sir, That's not military efficiency. That's psychological warfare, elevated to art form. I pulled up the casualty reports. 3 vessels lost, 200 personnel dead. The humans had suffered at least 5,000 casualties from our assault on their installations. But they'd achieved their objective. We'd expended most of our ammunition, disrupted our supply lines, exhausted our crews, and accomplished nothing except proving that defeating them would cost more than we'd calculated. Officer Corrin. Commander Veleth's face appeared on the screen. He looked old, tired, angry in a way that suggested he was angry at himself. You were right. Sir? This isn't warfare, this is... He trailed off, searching for words. Expensive, I supplied. Yes, expensive and sustainable. For them, not for us. He rubbed his forward mandibles, a stress gesture I'd never seen from him before. The hierarch has authorized one final assault. Total commitment. Every ship, every weapon. We're going to force them into open battle and end this. Commander, that's exactly what they... I know. But we're past tactical wisdom. This has become political. The hierarchy can't allow one species to resist enforcement. It sets a precedent. I felt my secondary arms go still. A precedent? Yes. If humans can defy the hierarchy, others will try. The entire political structure becomes unstable, so we have to win. Or at least, appear to win. Even if it costs us the entire fleet. Even then. The transmission cut. I sat in my command chair, surrounded by damaged systems and exhausted crew, and thought about appearances versus reality. We could destroy the Terran Alliance. Probably. With total commitment and complete disregard for casualties. But the cost would cripple the Korvath military for a generation. And somewhere, on some other border, another species would be watching, learning that the hierarchy could be made to bleed. But that was the precedent the humans were really setting. Not that they could win. That fighting them cost too much. I found Hayes' contact information in the civilian logistics database. Probably a court-martial offense to use it. Definitely a violation of protocol. I sent the message anyway. Short, direct. Probably stupid. This is Officer Vaith Corrin. The hierarch is committing the entire fleet to one final assault. Total force. Maximum aggression. You have 3 days to prepare. I thought you should know. The response came back in under an hour. Thanks for the heads up. Why? I stared at that question. Why warn the enemy? Why risk my career, my life, everything I'd built in Korvath military service? I typed slowly. Because you were right, about fixing broken things, about not stopping. We should have stopped. Another pause. Then, yeah. So you should have. Can you win? Against the entire fleet? No. Then why keep fighting? The answer took longer this time. Because somebody has to show the hierarchy they can't just do this. Can't just decide to conquer whoever they want, whenever they want. Even if we lose, we'll lose in a way that makes the next target harder to take. That's suicide. Probably. But it's also precedent. I read that message 3 times. Precedent. The same word Veleth had used, but from a completely different perspective. The hierarchy needed precedent that resistance failed. The humans needed precedent that resistance cost, and they were willing to die to establish it. Hayes? Yeah? Good luck. Thanks. You too. The final assault began 36 hours later. The entire Korvath expeditionary fleet. 600 ships in formation. Every weapon system active. Every tactical advantage pressed. We crossed into Terran space expecting last-ditch resistance. Desperate defensive stands. Suicide runs. The chaotic violence of a species facing extinction. Instead, we found 50 human ships in perfect formation, holding position at the edge of an asteroid field. Waiting. They're not running, Veleth said. He sounded almost sad. They're actually going to fight. Yes, Commander. Tactical assessment? My sensor officer pulled up the analysis. 50 vessels versus 600. They're outgunned 30 to 1. No logical scenario exists where they achieve anything except delaying the inevitable. Then why do it? I thought about that question, about operational persistence, about working 30-hour shifts because stopping didn't occur to you, about species that remembered everything and refused to quit. Because giving up would be worse, I said quietly. Velith was silent for a long moment. Then, all ships, weapons free, show them mercy where possible, but end this. The fleet advanced. The humans opened fire. I won't describe the battle in detail. Some memories don't deserve that kind of preservation. But I'll tell you this. They fought for 6 hours. They lost 42 ships. They disabled or destroyed 93 of ours. Not through superior tactics or advanced weapons. Through absolute refusal to acknowledge mathematical certainty. Every time we destroyed a ship, the debris would explode, deliberately, scattering fragments that damaged nearby vessels. Every disabled platform kept firing until its power core failed. Every captured position was rigged to self-destruct. And they didn't fight to win. They fought to be expensive. And they succeeded. Captain Okafor's ship was the last one standing. The Defiant Hope. One of those converted cargo haulers, barely armed. Hull plating breached in 40 places, life support failing, still fighting. Velith opened communications one final time. Captain Okafor, stand down. Your fleet is destroyed. Your defensive positions are eliminated. You've lost. Surrender and we'll evacuate your crew. Her face on the screen was bloody, tired, still wearing that same sad smile. Commander Velith, you came here with 600 ships. How many you got left? Silence. That's what I thought. You won. Congratulations. You beat us. Now go home and explain to your hierarch why it cost you 500 warships to conquer 47 installations and 50 civilian vessels. This was necessary to maintain order, to establish precedent. Yeah, you established it. She leaned forward. Every species in this sector watched you struggle to defeat us, watched you burn through your fleet to suppress one resistance. And they're going to remember. Next time the hierarchy decides to enforce something, they're going to remember what it cost to enforce it here. The Defiant Hope shuddered. Emergency klaxons in the background. So yeah, you won. But Commander, that smile widened slightly. Was it worth it? The transmission died. 30 seconds later, the Defiant Hope exploded. We limped home with 107 ships, 500 lost, 30,000 personnel casualties. The entire military budget for 3 cycles expended, and technically, a victory. We'd conquered Terran space, eliminated their defensive positions, established precedent. The hierarch held a ceremony, awarded medals, made speeches about the strength of the hierarchy and the cost of defiance. I stood at attention and thought about Hayes, about Captain Okafor's smile, about 50 ships fighting 600 because somebody had to establish that resistance cost. They'd lost, we'd won. And 6 cycles later, when the Dreth Collective rejected hierarchy terms, when the Velen Congress refused territorial concessions, when species across the outer systems started calculating whether the hierarchy would really commit that many resources to enforce compliance. That's when I understood. The humans hadn't been fighting to win. They'd been fighting to change the equation. I submitted my resignation 3 cycles after the victory ceremony, took early retirement, accepted the pension, walked away from the career I'd built my entire life around. The hierarch tried to convince me to stay, promised promotion, appealed to duty. I declined, because I'd seen what duty cost when applied to species that refused to break. I moved to a civilian outpost, far from the border, far from military service, far from the memories of burning ships and impossible odds and a species that made losing cost more than winning. Hayes found me there, 6 months after my retirement. He walked into the civilian cantina where I was drinking something that approximated Korvath stimulant beverages and sat down across from me without asking. Officer Corrin, Corporal Hayes. We sat in silence for a moment. Heard you retired, he said finally. Yes, Because of us? I thought about that question. About 600 ships and impossible mathematics and the sound of the defiant hope exploding. Because of what you taught me. What did we teach you? I looked at him. At this human who jury-rigged broken processes and worked 30-hour shifts and survived a battle that should have killed him. That some things are more expensive than they're worth. Hayes was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled. That same crooked grin from the depot, a lifetime ago. Yeah, we're real good at expensive. Your people paid a terrible price for that lesson. Yeah, we did. He stared into his drink. Lost a lot of good people. Captain Okafor, the crews at Delta 7. Half the defense fleet. I'm sorry. Don't be. We knew the cost going in. Chose to pay it anyway. He looked up. Question is, did it work? Did we actually change anything? I thought about the Dreth Collective, about the Velen Congress, about 3 species that had successfully negotiated better terms with the hierarchy in the 6 months since Terran enforcement, about the hierarch's increasingly frustrated speeches about maintaining authority, about the cost-benefit analyses running through command, calculating whether enforcement was still viable. Yes, I said quietly, you changed everything. Hayes nodded slowly. Good. That's good. We drank in silence. What are you doing here? I asked eventually. I thought humans didn't forgive easily. We don't. But Captain Okafor's last order, before the Hope went down, she transmitted a message to surviving crew. He pulled out a small data chip, placed it on the table between us. Said to find the Korvath officer who warned us about the final assault. Said anyone willing to risk their career to do the right thing deserved better than to drink alone in the dark. I stared at the chip. What's on it? Personnel records. Every human who died in the war. Names, service histories, next of kin. He pushed it toward me. She wanted you to have it, so you'd know who they were, what they gave up. My secondary arms trembled. I can't. Yeah, you can, because you're the only Korvath officer who seemed to understand what we were actually doing, and Captain Okafor figured you might want to remember them. The people who made the hierarchy blink. I picked up the chip, felt its weight in my palm. 5,000 names, 5,000 people who'd chosen expensive over survival. Thank you, I said quietly. Hayes stood, stretched, started toward the door, then paused. Hey, Corin? Yes? We're not done, you know. Humans. We're not going to just sit quiet now that the hierarchy knows we bite. We're going to keep pushing, keep testing, keep making things expensive. I know. Good. He grinned. Just wanted to make sure somebody did. He left. I sat alone with my drink and a data chip containing 5,000 ghosts and the certain knowledge that everything I'd understood about power and warfare and resistance had been fundamentally wrong. The humans hadn't lost. They'd invested, and the hierarchy was going to be paying interest for a long, long time. Personal log entry. Final officer Vaith Corin, retired. Location: civilian outpost. Tethys: psychological state. Caffeinated, contemplative, changed. I spent my career studying warfare. Tactics, strategy, force projection, resource management. I thought I understood how conflicts worked, who won, who lost, what victory meant. The humans taught me different. They taught me that losing can be more powerful than winning, that persistence matters more than perfection, that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do to an enemy isn't defeat them, it's make them question whether defeating you was worth the cost. I keep the data chip on my desk. 5,000 names. Sometimes I read them, learn their stories, who they were before they became precedent. They were logistics officers, engineers, communications specialists, and people who fixed broken things because stopping didn't occur to them. Just like Hayes, the hierarchy still stands, still enforces, still demands compliance, but they calculate differently now. Before every enforcement action, someone runs the numbers, estimates the cost, compares it to projected benefit, and sometimes, not often, But sometimes they choose negotiation instead. That's the precedent. Not that resistance wins, that resistance costs, and some costs aren't worth paying. I don't know what happens next. Whether the humans will push harder, whether the hierarchy will adapt, whether the careful balance of power and expense will hold or collapse. But I know this. I met a species that turned construction foam into weapons and painted graffiti on warships and fought impossible odds because somebody needed to establish that impossible costs. And they changed the galaxy. Not through strength, through stubbornness. That's worth remembering. That's worth the nightmares and the guilt and the quiet knowledge that I contributed to a war that should never have happened. Because maybe, just maybe, the next officer who gets enforcement orders will remember the Terran border incident. Will remember 500 ships. Will remember the defiant hope exploding rather than surrendering. Will ask, is this worth it? And sometimes that question is the most powerful weapon of all.